for coming out to Malvern Books tonight. We are here to celebrate the release of Harold Whit Williams' book, Red Clay Journal.
Woo!
Yes. Before I introduce our readers for tonight, if everybody could just make sure anything you have on you that is electronic and or makes noise, you turn it off, silence it. And also while you're doing that, I'll just point out that because it's National Poetry Month, all of our poetry books are 20% off all month long. All right, so our first reader tonight is Tim Krcmarik. Tim is a 12-year veteran of the Austin Fire Department. His first book, The False Lark, was published by Diabolical Genius Press in 2013. He's a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, and he lives here in Austin with his wife and son. Please welcome Tim Krcmarik.
Thank you. And Whit, thanks for the invitation. Congratulations. It's awesome to be here tonight to celebrate your new cool book, Red Clay Journal, which is great. Probably don't have to tell a bunch of people here, but it is really good. I've read it many times, and it kicks ass. Let's be frank about it. So I'm just going to read a couple of poems to open up for Whit and kind of set the stage, and then let him get up here and do his thing. I'm going to start. I'm going to read a couple poems from that book, The False Lark, and then just a couple of newbies. Yeah, I'm going to start with this one called Coffee, because I drink a lot of coffee. And as I work downtown, right now I work Engine 1, so if you're downtown on 6th Street, you fall down, there's a 33% chance any day of the week that you'll see me there coming in. Scrape you up off the pavement. That's a big part of what we do. And the thing about being down there is we run all day and all night. It's one of the busiest companies in the city, and we drink a ton of coffee. Like I drank coffee, but then I got down there and then I really started drinking coffee. And so last shift, it was about 2:30 in the morning, and we just got back from a call, and we're upstairs, and one of my younger guys, we're just standing there talking, and I noticed he has a fresh cup of coffee, like a brand new piping hot fresh cup of coffee at 2:30 in the morning. And I said, man, are you drinking coffee? Aren't you going to try to get some kind of sleep tonight? He's like, no, man, someone just made a pot of coffee. So I'm like, no. And we just drink coffee for the rest of the night and just kept running calls. So that's kind of how it is. This is called Coffee. The first sign of serious addiction was that I didn't bother to put on clothes this morning, but loped stark naked across the freezing house to boil water in a small green pot, that exotic beans should yield their aromatic beanhood and conceive the dawn's cup of scalding bitter black. And it's probably a symptom of something far worse, that upon discovering our store had run dry, I became a gazelle, pierced through the heart with arrows, arrows of muddle-headedness, arrows of gloom and fatigue. To the untrained eye, I may have looked like a man shuffling around the supermarket aisles in his bathrobe and slippers, when really I was a wounded creature crawling toward a desert oasis for a sip of crystal moisture and a shady place to die. A few minutes later, when the sun broke in the east as floodwaters crossed the great savanna, and I drank at last from the dark springs of resurrection, I shook my twisted horns at the sky and took my first great leaps through the burning wheel of the day. Though had you been passing by my house that very minute, driving to work or jogging in the cool air, you may have seen only a man sitting on his porch steps, holding a mug of white porcelain close to his face, the steam rising perhaps like some great mystery. Next I'm going to read a poem called Buffalo, as in Buffalo, New York. In what is surely a lesser display of natural majesty, two turtle doves sparring over a bath on the front porch this evening have wedged themselves in the cat's water bowl. The cat is staring up at me, wanting to know if I would mind very much if she just sauntered over there and ate those things. I return her gaze worriedly. owner of a small roadside inn on the route to Lake Placid or Buffalo, summoned to rescue another old married couple glued together by a life of trivial bitterness from the clutches of the sputtering jacuzzi. My thoughts drifting as I walked to the tool shed for a shoehorn and a can of axle grease, towards selling off the place before it's too late, and repairing with my wife and son into an unabashedly romanticized vision of the North American landscape, painted by Thomas Cole, or any member really, of the Hudson River School. My cat, I lost both my cats in the span of the last 45 days. One of them had to be put down, and the other one, we're pretty sure she wandered out to go find a place to die, so pretty sure. She did love to fight with dogs, so it's very possible she finally just bit off more than she could chew. She was 14 years old. But either way, I thought tonight I would read this poem, Cat, about, you know, all those cats that live in Austin. Austin's full of just street cats. So we live in, fortunately, we're in a neighborhood where everybody just kind of takes care of them. Cat. For Rocket. That's my one you just did. Believe me, beautiful, it's not that helping of burnt hamburger and white picket fangs you call a face. Nor is it your eyes, slits of wet jade chipped off the belly of a hothouse Buddha, that endear you to me. Not those tired treads riven in the fibers of your tail, nor your breath, which reeks of field onions and red-blooded mice. It's the way you walk straight into the wind, sidling along the rust fence, hissing your cantankerous feline haiku at nothing in particular. The very thing you love most in this world, nothing in particular. Here's one about, this is I guess it's based on a true story about getting punched in the face by a prostitute in East Austin many years ago. It's called Expletives. There are plenty of words to describe the prostitute who loosens my right canine with a single, well-placed hook as I kneel beside her on the sidewalk one rainy Tuesday in May to see if she is breathing. Featherweight isn't one of them. Neither is angel, except in the most earthly sense of that word, nor any of the garden variety expletives more suited to careening down a flight of stairs or smashing one's thumb with a hammer. But I don't need a single one. When the medics returned to the firehouse that night and slap-headedly relayed her name, Princess, to the rest of us sitting around our slab of green formica, filthy from the afternoon's work, and cutting hungrily into steaks so perfectly rare they demand an astonishing red. Something heavy with forest floor, balanced by notes of apple or citrus, and just the slightest hint of mangled pride. I'm going to read one called, this next one, find it. This is called Rain. And I mentioned, I'll just go ahead and read this one. It's called Rain. In the 1530s, nobody thought twice when a black nimbus swirling above the neighborhood like a warty toad or fork-tongued adder unleashed a biblical deluge of warty toads and fork-tongued adders, rather than the normal torrents of May. They just shrugged their shoulders, figuring the usual impieties had caused it, or some simple aberrance in Mother Nature. And perhaps that is why the geographer, Jacob Ziegler, sitting at his desk in Strasbourg centuries ago on a stormy morning like this, and struggling to organize his thoughts on the origin of lemmings, decided they must fall in one phenomenal plague from a single rodent-shaped cloud when the snows receded and people needed torment to sway them from the urges of spring. And perhaps that is why I will feel every part the fool for staring up so expectantly if this blimp grumbling over Walnut Avenue, shaped like the girls' competitive dance squad from my old high school, holds something else altogether, like the terrible hands of Zeus, or worse yet, a tender, pleasant rain. That's true. Originally, lemmings, that was the original theory behind these hordes of dead lemmings that would show up. People thought, you know, originally it must be a cloud. Weird. This one is called, actually, let me see real quick. I'm going to read two that kind of go together. Yeah, I'm going to read this one. This is called Sisyphus's Beard. Everybody, there's a few different versions of the story of Sisyphus. Basically, he died. In some versions of the story, he was a murderous king. In some, he was just crafty, a trickster. He dies, he goes to the underworld, and he really wants to come back. He convinces the god of the underworld to let him come back and see his wife one last time. He has unfinished business. In some, he's just in love with her and wants to see her one last time and sort of charms his way out of Hades. In others, he says he wants to go back and basically, you know, complain to her because she didn't bury him properly, didn't give him all his due. Either way, when he gets up there and it's time to go back, he doesn't want to go back. So that's to punish him. He's the guy they chained to that boulder, and he's got to push it up the hill forever and just eternal, eat eternally. And then everybody thinks that's a terrible story until Camus comes along and says, but think about it, he did what he wanted, he lived his own life, regardless of what the gods would think. He's an existentialist hero, and you know, at least there's that moment when the boulder rolls down the hill, he gets to walk down after it, and there's nothing the gods can do about it. So for Camus, that was the heroic reward, you know, for being an existentialist hero. So this is called Sisyphus's Beard. It's about his beard. It might have been gosling peach fuzz, or a little hipster soul patch, when they hauled him off to eternity and married him to that famous boulder. It might have been mutton chops like mastodon tusks, or the rakish Van Dyke of courtly fop. But whatever it was, you never hear of Sisyphus lathering his 5 o'clock shadow or stepping out for a haircut and a hot towel shave. Thus, as the days of his punishment piled up, it must have brushed the dusty well of his umbilicus, and later mopped the blood and tears from his feet. Leapfrog an eon, and you would find it dragging the craggy nether earth like a river of angel hair lichen, like a sweep of tree roots and clinging vines, sprinting down slope as Sisyphus kept on throwing his bird body backwards and heaving his great torment another half-inch uphill. One day his cloudy eyes would have lost track of it forever, leaving time and nature to nest it with forests and wild game, with alpine meadows and snowmelt lakes. The geological weight of the thing, turning the old king to a wondrous green glacier, and his stone to the salty little pebble I roll around my mouth as the chickens take a dust bath and the air grows electric with rain. I'm going to just read a couple of new poems and turn it over to Whit. Yeah, this one's called Dunkleosteus. It's from a collection that's just about done being edited, so way behind. Dunkleosteus was a creature back in the Devonian period. It was sort of the creature at the top of the food chain. It was a giant, bony, armored shark. If you Google it, it's a pretty cool image. Back then, this is 375 million years ago. Most of the Earth is kind of a shallow sea, but this giant shark-like creature ruled the roost. So it was at the top. So we have something in common with Dunkleosteus, where we find ourselves now, at the very top. Anyway, it's called Dunkleosteus. Consider yourself counted, sister bluebird, chirping for crumbs on the street of white marble between my coffee and cigarettes. Little lost Gretel, singing for your supper while Hansel hides above us, holding his stomach in the canopy's deep, dark green. Though what do I know? I don't speak bluebird. You might just as well be your species' Amazon queen, throwing down a tiny silver gauntlet, prophesying the day your kind will force us back under the rock from whence we came. Or Joan of Arc, ordering your legions forward, while I sit here stirring sugar absently into a double espresso, trying to remember what I was just thinking about and why. Last year I broke my wrist. I had never really broken a bone that badly before, but I was overconfident on a ladder, shall we say, and like just ate it from about 12 feet up. And I came up and just had a classic, what they call a silver spoon or silver fork fracture, and drove myself to the hospital. Ended up having surgery on it. Now I have a plate and 6 screws in there. It feels great, but the surgeon did a great job. But anyway, so this is a rumination on that. I kind of missed out on a good chunk of last summer. I still got in the pool with my kids, and I couldn't get my arm wet, you know what I mean? So I couldn't really swim or have any kind of fun. So this is about a rumination on that. It's called Oh. She must have seen the storm clouds swirling around my head, the orthopedist wrapping my wrist in layers of wet fiberglass, when she rolled her eyes like a teenager asked to have opinions about iambic pentameter or democracy, and said, oh, it's not the end of the world. Not, oh, the way a poet would say it, at the sight of a naked lover or passing hearse, but oh, the way your Meemaw would say it, meaning people in her day got along just fine without any arms at all, or iambic pentameter for that matter, lovers, hearses, democracy. And if I was too busy sulking as she sealed me in a crypt for the rest of summer, with nothing for company but a cask of Amontillado and the mellow laughter of the stars, then later, watching my wife and son splash around our neighborhood pool, I managed a tepid grin for her slap on the hand to stop being a big fat baby and be grateful I hadn't broken my writing hand or femurs or balls. It could be worse, I called to the lifeguard, slathering her silky arms with cocoa butter, just as a pigeon passed over with that loaded look of fate all pigeons have. I'll just read one more. This is called Punk. Punk. Winter is pounding my house like a bully on the hunt for chump change. Like one pissed off albatross convinced I've got the ancient mariner hidden in the attic under a pile of treasure maps and old brown sweaters. But actually, I'm writing a poem for doomed sinners called My Summer Vacation, about a famous swan dive I did 20 years ago in the anchovy brine that doubled as our local pool, and how I sprang from the water like a saved Pentecostal, right in time for me and the live Dvorak triplets to watch my dark blue swim trunks float away. That's when I appear from the future, wanting only to pat my younger self on the shoulder and impart a few words of artful assurance that like a whoopee cushion slipped onto my chair while I led the class through our Pledge of Allegiance. This will all seem very funny further down Puberty Road. But that little punk has already zipped back up the diving board ladder, shameless as the day he was born, and he's bouncing loudly up and down, so all the ladies present will sit up and take note of those gifts bestowed unto him. And though I have pinpointed the precise moment my life went astray, I am sorry to leave my readers with that closing image. So here's a tufted titmouse at the open window, pecking millet from my outstretched hand. Thank you.